Alright, we're here. Stereotomia with the vertebrates. Talk about some fish. I love me some fish. I took a class all about some fish called ichthyology. It was awesome. Learned so many different fish. There's a ton of minnows in Alabama. Who knew? But that's what my teacher studied. That's what she did her research with. So we learned a lot about minnows in Alabama. I also learned about some other cool fish. There's so many cool, interesting adaptations, behavioral features that they display and show. They're such an odd but amazing group. I love me some fish. So we're going to look at them and like some of the precursors, early type vertebrates, those sorts of things. Shark, right? So fishes turns out to be kind of a broad term. Depends on what kind you're looking at. You're looking at bony fish, lobe fin fish, cartilaginous fish, or hagfish, right? Jawless fishes. So yeah, but there's a ton of diversity of fish. One of the more diverse vertebrate groups out there, if not the most. Variety of fin types, evolutionary histories. Technically, we're fish, if you want to get kind of down to it, because it's not a monophyletic group. But yeah, it's a cool one. I like them a lot. So let's look at them. So the chordates, the early vertebrates, they had a cranium, which is a brain case, and so they had that thing. And so they have this neural crest also that forms near the hollow nerve cord. This would help give rise to maybe some of those, that closing anyway. You can see it here. It's like, okay, we have the beginning stages, those plates come together. It's like, all right, got ourselves look a little bit of a spinal cord working with here. And then these cells also help contribute to the cranium and other vertebrate structures. So those unique vertebrate type structures come along there. These do things through those cells. And then there are craniates. And so the craniates mean you have a cranium and a neural crest. So when you have that structure and you have a cranium, you're considered a member of CRANIATA. So they are. So hagfishes have the neural crest and the cranium, but actually lack vertebrae. So it turns out that's possible. So yeah, so I guess without further ado, we'll look at these things. So let's look at the jawless fishes. All right, we'll look at the jawless fishes. Agnatha. So agnatha means without jaws. There you go. But they're craniates, and so they're missing some fins in some ways, and they're also missing jaws. So that's a bummer. They are scavengers. They feed on whatever they can feast on in the ocean. So if something dies in the ocean, you're going to see a lot of these things swarming on it. If something dies in the ocean, it's big enough, you're going to see some crazy stuff. So like when whales die, it's like a feast of all these different organisms coming around just devouring that corpse and just feeding on everything it can. So that's a thing. When you see a hagfish, look for a dead body. So yeah, they also release slime. There's videos of this. Watch the videos. It is ridiculous what they're able to do with slime and how quick they can make it and use it. And then lampreys are part of this group. And so they're the first with some of those vertebrate characteristics, and they can be parasites on other fish. So yeah, so the hagfish are scavengers, use a lot of slime. Lamprey, parasites. It's kind of weird. Okay. And so hagfishes are considered to be part of vertebrata. But just the difference is they kind of lost their vertebrae secondarily. So they had it in their earlier forms, and their ancestor did, but in their current forms, they don't have it anymore. That's the current research. And so, but in this more simplified case, if you said they didn't have vertebrae and put them outside of it, I'm not going to fault you for it. I mean, some of these things are still debated, you know. All right, let's look at some hagfish. And so, hagfish, again, cranium, no vertebrae. Good number of species, but I mean, our good number of species is now down to a couple, tens of species, 30s. All scavengers. Slime is their name of their game. So when you see something like this inside the ocean, you may have a predator wants to go up, eat this soft thing, because they don't have a hard, parts to them. They don't have like a cool shell, but instead they have mucus. So they have these bunch of slime glands. They'll release a protein from that, and then the thing will mess with water, and then slime everywhere. It's gross. I've never seen it in person, but man, I'd like to. I would like to just poke one of these things and cause it, release it. They have an eel-like form to them, so people want to call them, well, think of it as more like put them in with this other eel-type fish, but they're not, right? They're a hagfish, but they're in a whole different class. And they do not have true fins or compound eyes, so they really can't see that well, which is kind of nice. And they use suction and some spines to actually tear through and feed, but no real, again, jaws present. And they can also absorb nutrients through skin, which is kind of unusual. So not many animals can do that. And they're currently the only known living animals with a skull and no vertebral column. But they are jawless, along with the old lampreys. So trying to figure out where they're going. Longest one was 4 feet. And so, looking at their teethies, that's some messed up looking teeth, right? And so we'll just latch on and just try and try and shear through and just feed upon them. It's kind of messed up, but they do it. They go for it all, and they're still around. So they're clearly something's working. And so the plate will protract and retract and helps them just grab food, draw it into their mouth, and just feed on it. They can also, they know they have jaws, so they can generate this strong pressure. So they'll kind of use knots and like twist their body in knots to help generate a pull on it so they can rip off flesh. And so through reduction of these things, pretty unknown. There's a feeding frenzy taking place over there, so maybe something after that. Feed a lot, get some good nutrition in. There's a little dead fish on the left side. Hagfish are making their way through feeding upon that thing. If you die in the ocean, a hagfish is going to get you, so just let you know. And then they don't have a larval stage, so they just kind of, hagfish for life. And they're able to devour larger prey from the inside. So just bore a hole open and go in there and eat it and go crazy. And they can make meals last a pretty good amount of time, so that's a unique trait for them. Well, not really, but I mean, it's something they're able to do. So, because when you're scavengers in the ocean, you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. So, it's important you can make that food last. Otherwise, you're not going to survive very long because you're going to die of starvation. So, that slow metabolism has to be very, very key. Otherwise, you have to eat a lot more often, and that's going to make it a little difficult when you're very opportunistic as a hunter for your nutrition. So here's some examples of their slime. Definitely check the videos out. They're so cool. I've seen this. This is the bottom right shows the knot they can do. And so that is very much something they can do. And when seawater reacts with it, it causes all this slime to just get released. Just buckets of it. And so they're actually trying to figure out ways to use this. And so you can take a teaspoon of slime into a full beaker full in just seconds. It doesn't take much. We're researching about it, trying to figure out ways to use it because it's like it's super common and easy to get. So like, hey, why can we not use it in some way? And it's also biodegradable in a really good way. And so they're thinking about trying to use it in food packaging, bungee cords, band-aids, and even clothing. So soon enough, you could be wearing hagfish-made clothes. So that's fun and also very neat. It's biodegradable like that. The slime threads are very, very thin compared to hair, but they're also extremely strong. So very thin and very strong. So trying to figure out, how those work. And so they're obviously you take these genes out of them and try and apply it to bacteria and see if we can kind of, replace this and do this in lab in vitro and get some cool products out of it. So maybe that's a key part of what's coming in the future. I mean, why not? So with vertebrates. Think about it. Key characteristics of vertebrates. What you think of? There's a few, for sure, right? And so they're there. And so think about it. What are the traits you think of when you think about a vertebrate? Well, vertebrates are pretty diverse. Obviously, the most diverse chordate group out there. You can have a shark, to a pig, to a flying falcon, to a frog, to a snake. That's pretty diverse in my book. And so, yeah, they're there. About 60,000 described species of all these chordates, of all the vertebrates, which again seems like a lot, but go back a bit and look at some of our other species numbers for their organisms and see how it compares. It's pretty amazing how we have all this stuff to talk about left, and like there's not as like a crazy amount of species left. So there's a few groups we've talked about that have more species. So one of their key characteristics is they have a vertebral column, a backbone, if you will. They also have jaws, endoskeleton, and a cranium, so a brain case. So the endoskeleton, of course, bones on the inside of some way, or bones can be made of more than just bone, though. So it can be cartilages, like the sharks. But bone development is an important part of this process to provide some of those hardened parts. But I mean, cartilage kind of serves as a replacement for bone in some spots. All right. Vertebrates. So what does it mean to be a vertebrate? So again, vertebral column. Think about it. This thing provides support for your entire body. It's the main central access point for your body. Things build upon this thing. It's the scaffolding of the body, the framework of this thing. And so it helps provide structure, helps you be able to have muscles attached to it to allow you to make certain movements. It allows you to stand, provide support for the body, support the upper region of the body. So very, very important there. It protects nerves too. You have that whole spinal cord thing going down the body, and if that gets tweaked in a way, then that can lead to some rough times. And so this helps protect those delicate, precious nerves as best as it can. Of course, the cranium, so the protective skull surrounding the brain, because the brains are important. We get more cephalization in this group, so you have more nerves in those areas, so you need something to protect those nerves. So you need a nice, strong brain case just for that purpose. Also, those neural crest cells, which are important for development, they help determine what structures are going to become what. So it's an important developmental structure. And then, of course, pronounced cephalization goes right along there with the cranium, right? Much more of a concentrated head region. You look at a picture of my dog there in a Wonder Woman costume, you know where her head region is. It's concentrated. I know where her head region is. She knows where her head region is. So very pronounced cephalization there. That is her Wonder Woman costume. She likes it a lot, kind of. I like it a lot, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah. And then the endoskeleton and bones themselves, in the vertebral column, muscle attachment. So for us to be able to move, make all the crazy movements that we do, and other animals, other vertebrates, we help make it happen due to the muscles that attach to those bones. So if you ever take A&P, or if you have taken A&P, you should remember all those different bones, and then all the muscle attachment points on them via bone markings. And the more you use them, the more prominent they are on the muscles, on the bones. So they shape each other, and they're very important. All right, lamprey. And so I'm going to go through. Here's some other groups of vertebrates. So lampreys, shown here. Okay, so lampreys are vertebrates, but they don't have jaws, so they're a jawless fish. But the study of fish, ichthyology is what it's called. That's how you spell it, ichthyology. Ich relates to fish. Now let's think about it. Are fishes monophyletic, paraphyletic, or polyphyletic? Let's think about that for a second. What do you think? So if you think about it, just a living fish, okay, group them together. That's my paraphyletic group, or excuse me, polyphyletic group. But if you use fish, ancestor, and all the descendants, they're a paraphyletic group because we have to be included. When you think about classic fishes, you don't include humans and birds and reptiles and all that stuff with it. So yeah. When the fishes pop up, it turns out the age of fish was the Devonian period. What? So this is the big age of fishes time. So that's when they first pop. All right, so now look at the vertebrates. The old lamprey. You can see one feeding on a fish there. It's not a head on a fish. It's a lamprey. It's a creepy mouth. So they are about 38 species of lampreys, roughly. They can be in freshwater or marine environments. Usually you have some sort of like freshwater larval form that goes to the sea or larger bodies of water to become adults, become parasitic. Not all adults will feed. Some will just go and reproduce and die. Other ones will actually live a little bit after the fact. But it just kind of depends. The lamprey themselves, their larval forms kind of like lancelets. So you can kind of look again that shared evolutionary history of development can be seen in these groups. But after they become adults, they usually don't live very long. They just hit maturity, reproduce, die. So these big, massive swarms of lamprey breeding. And so if you're parasitic, you can live a little longer, but not all of them will. The cartilaginous skeleton that they have is pretty simple. It's not that fancy. And so the vertebrae aren't that complicated or elaborate. It's just kind of enough of something they count to be a vertebrate. It's in there. Just eked in there, but I got it. And some can only be freshwater, and some can be fish or fresh to ocean. It just kind of depends. This is actually pretty common in fish, or it can be. But you can see these conditions with also the reverse kind of core too, and so it just it's a thing. So some fish can do it. It's hard to do though because the water changes, right? And so the salt concentration changes. So you have to be careful with like water movement and make sure you don't die. And usually that's a tough adjustment for fish to make, but these are able to make that change and do so. The larvae can live buried in the ground for years and then feed on stuff as it comes along, and then boom, spawn, and then die. Okay. So with lampreys, they kind of have an eel-like appearance to them as well, but again, not. No scales, no paired fins. They have bigger eyes, but their eyes kind of suck. You know, they're not like super, super fantastic eyes. It's not gonna stare you down too much. If they're half parasitic, so of those 38, about 18 are parasitic, they will attach to the body and then use their teeth to cut holes through the flesh. And they usually feed upon fish because how's a fish going to knock it off? It's not. It has a crappy little fins, no hands, so it can't knock it away. So just cut through the tissue and just feed on the flesh. And so it's kind of gruesome. There's a great episode of River Monsters where the main guy on that actually does that and lets when these lampreys feed upon him. It's for a brief minute. Well, he doesn't fully let on. He lets it attach, but it doesn't fully bore a hole through them. They operate quick, though, so be careful swimming in some water when these things are found. The northern lamprey actually has the highest number of chromosomes among vertebrates. It has between 164 to 174 chromosomes, which is pretty insane. And there's one lamprey that actually has an extremely high tolerance for free iron, which is kind of unusual. So that's one we don't have either. If you have too much iron, it'll cause some major health effects in your body. And these are used a lot in research purposes. So in fact, our very own Dr. Banks, she does research with these on various developmental pathways and development. It's her thing. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, talk with her. Maybe get a major or a minor in neuro. Have a good time. Do some research. And if you don't like it, well, just look at the lampreys. Study them if you want to. Study their behavior. Study their ecology. It's tons of stuff you can do with an organism. So if you want to work in a lab, you can still work with animals. If you work with animals, you can also work outside, not step foot in a lab. Biology is very flexible in that way. And so they also have a pretty strong adaptive immune system, but it's convergent, which means we do not share it with them due to ancestry. It just happened to pop up, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because they're feeding on this blood and guts and everything of all these organisms, so it kind of makes sense they'd have an immune system. I mean, I would, so I don't get sick. Here's the mouth. So one of the weird things is there's a thing with some pictures you can look up, and this has been like put on like tons of structures. Like I've seen like people put this on like a foot, and it's disturbing. So look for pictures of this at your own peril, but it's weird. More lampreys. They have a lateral line system, commonly found amongst fish. And so it's these sensory cells help them sense movement in water and figure out kind of where they're going. Hagfish have it. Many other fish have it. Sharks have it. It's also used to help detect any sort of prey items or predators that are coming their way. So help find food to eat or avoid being food. It's also used for coordination with schools amongst those. They can kind of get a feel for where each other is in space. So it helps you to detect movement, vibration, and pressure gradients in the water that surrounds you, providing a unique spatial awareness to them. So they're important. Another is it's jaw time, right? So we've talked about vertebrates, kind of got in there a little bit, but still no jaws. It's about time we get some jaws on the scene. Let's do it. So jaws, first off, where they come from. The gnathostomes is their group. Jaws are their game. And so their jaws came from gill arches. It sounds like a person, but it's not. Instead, so we had amongst the classic fish, you had some arches that supported the gills. Well, it turns out the hypothesis is that jaws came from some of these modified gill arches. The first two were changed and one pair became the jaw, another pair became the hyoid arch, which is used as a support mechanism for the jaw to the brain. This is still being studied to figure out fully if this is what happened. But it kind of makes sense, and maybe along the pathway, instead of actually being used to actually feed upon, these early jaws could have helped push more water through the mouth and help them breathe and get more oxygen in, so it could have had an effect. And then later on, once it kept getting bigger and bigger, it picked up on a new benefit of actually feeding on other organisms. So it's just kind of an interesting case of like intermediate evolution, those intermediate forms. What do they do? Well, this is one of those where it could have just helped breathing in general. These organisms. And also, jaws themselves are a big deal because it led to more predation behaviors, and that led to more intelligence to be able to pick out predators, and then for prey items to have more intelligence to avoid predation, and also other various adaptations and developments. So you have intelligence to evade getting captured, and then color patterns, again, hardened parts could come up again, so all sorts of different stuff, and also an immune system too. I mean, like if you're feeding upon or getting half bitten, things are getting in on you, so you need a way to be able to find a deal to fight off some of those things and have it not be such a big deal. And so the cognition and that sort of development of animals, Jaws played a big role with that. And so one of the things we look at is living jaws have 7 arches. Primitive jawless have 9. So you can see like, okay, some gill arches left, and that's kind of what's going on there. And so, yeah. Anyway, that's the jaw history. So make sure you kind of get a good beat on that. There's a lot more to that, but just kind of a quick version of it. All right, let's look at some groups. When you think about fish and some jaws, I think about sharks. So let's talk about some sharks. First off, placoderms. These are some extinct fish. So they're kind of cool. I'm going to move on these pretty quick, but they're all extinct. But they had a hinged jaw. They're the first ones to have one of those. They had some paired fins. The first set had pelvic fins. Some gave live birth, and they had placoid scales, which are important because they became something else. They didn't have true teeth. Instead, they had some bony plates that served as teeth. And they also had some that were the largest super predator and also largest kind of filter feeder person in the water. But they have these thick armor plates over certain regions to avoid getting eaten, because that kind of makes sense. You don't want to die. This group didn't last that long. It only lasted about 70 million years, which evolutionary time isn't that long. Meanwhile, sharks have been around for 400, so sharks won this battle. These things look pretty cool. They would swim around and just feast. You can see one in the picture in the top right. Obviously not real, it's a drawing. But going after a shark. But hey, shark won the long game with that. And so, yeah. Here's an example of the giant carnivore that was likely the first super predator. It was found worldwide. Some constructions made to show what it was like. It would eat sharks for sure, and so it would create an inward suction with a super strong bite force. The bite force at the tips could be 80,000 pounds per square inch. And so it was just insane how strong the bite force could be. And they would just open up their mouth and just like create just an almost an unfightable suction that would just lure prey items into it. But apparently not good enough. It just did. Here's another one. This is a giant filter feeder. At least that's what all evidence points to, because it doesn't have those strong bony plates, and it doesn't have the same sort of morphology to its skull to indicate that it was a predator of sorts. So if it doesn't have that, we can hypothesize it was likely a filter feeder. And this isn't too unlike our current whales. We have toothed whales and we have baleen whales. They have various completely different types of lifestyles. And so it's not that crazy to think about, like, they could have done the same thing. So it likely ate krill and small fish and got really big. So, cool. All right. One of the things these things had was placoid scales. This is pretty important. These are found in cartilaginous fishes, and they're homologous to our teeth. So the thinking is our teeth came from some of these scales being moved around inside the mouth, and the next thing you know, we got some teeth. Because you look at their structure, they have a central pulp cavity with dentine and enamel, kind of like our teeth do. So it's very fascinating. And then kind of once they're grown, they don't get bigger in size. Instead, you just add more scales. So if you have a shark and it's developing and it needs to grow more scales, well, it doesn't make those scales bigger. It just makes more scales. It kind of makes sense, right? But I mean, that clears that up. All right, let's look at some sharks and this group. So they've been around a long time, so a few 100 million years. They're jawed fish. It's more than just sharks. It's also skates, rays, and chimaeras. About 1,000 of these jokers still around. They do not have true bone, but recent evidence suggests that maybe they did in their ancestral forms, and they lost it to cartilage because cartilage is lighter. and they need all the help they can get to stay afloat in the water column so they don't sink to the bottom. So having a lighter skeleton is one such way. They don't rely on their pectoral fins to help provide lift and power to prevent them from falling to the bottom because they don't have a swim bladder like other fish do, which helps other fish stay afloat in the water. They do not have that. They have a special liver, but it's not quite the same thing. But one of the cons behind the cartilaginous skeleton is it's harder to find fossils of full sharks because the cartilage breaks down more than bone does. However, the skulls, and specifically the jaws, are easy to find because it has a much higher dense proportion of that cartilage to it. So it's easier for that to preserve a little bit. And you also find teeth. That's how we usually with sharks do it, is you look at the teeth and you can tell by the size and do some arrangements off of that, and also the jaws too. So with those two things together, we can learn a lot about sharks and how big they were in that capacity. They have two pairs of paired fins, so pectoral and pelvic. They have placoid scales. We talked about those a minute ago. Their upper jaw is fused to the skull, and their gill slits are exposed. Now, this makes breathing sometimes a little more difficult. Some have adaptations to deal with this, so it's not a deal breaker, and they can be solitary. Others, though, they have it to where they have to keep moving, otherwise they won't be able to breathe. So it just depends on the group, on the species that you're looking at. It just depends. All right. And so one of the ways they help them stay afloat in the water column is their liver. If you remember from the dissection, that thing is very big. And that thing is important because it makes a whole bunch of oils, helps make them lighter. And so they need that to try, again, stay afloat. They can move up and down the water column. It's a very good benefit for them as predators. And so they can do that. And so the liver helps with that greatly. It serves some similar functions as attempts to as the swim bladder does in other fishes. And of course, they need to swim or they will sink because of their weight, and they don't have a full proper swim bladder. They get the oil, and they have their fins that can create movement, but otherwise, they can be kind of tough. All right, how big can these jokers be? It depends. Some get very big, some are pretty small, like cute little babies. They live all across the ocean, all depths. Some freshwater even can move into it. Like this one, they'll pick the bull shark, and go ocean to fresh. The Megalodon, famously, was the big one. Had a movie come out about a couple years ago that was, I never saw it. I can only imagine how that was. I'm assuming the science was all over the place and quite ridiculous. But it was, that thing could get up to 16 meters in length as far as we know. So that thing could be pretty big. The largest living shark, it's kind of fascinating to think about. We'll get to that in a second. I'll show you that. But there's actually another small shark. It only gets about 8 inches. And so it's called the dwarf lantern shark. It's just kind of cute. And the largest living shark, though, the whale and the basking shark. So two sharks that are not actually really predatory in the sense you're thinking of. They filter feed and go around and feed in that way. So it's kind of cool with the largest sharks out there. It's ones that actually aren't going to hurt you in any way. They just look creepy. But whale sharks and manta rays are found in the Georgia Aquarium. So if those places ever open up again, you guys should go visit them. If you're ever in Atlanta, check out Coke World because it's right next to the Atlanta Aquarium, and then check out the Georgia Aquarium right there, and then you can see those things. It's really awesome. It's a great exhibit. It's really, really cool. So yeah. Here's some pictures that show Megalodon's maximum size and conservative size estimates, right? This thing is not alive. It's dead. It's not coming around again. And so don't worry about it. Worry about other real things instead of something that's not existing anymore. But it was around. It was big. I'm glad it's not around anymore because look at that thing. It was huge. It feasts upon you. One bite. But yeah, so the Meg obviously came about. We've always had a fascination, I guess, with these big monster sharks. Why would a big shark care about a tiny human? Not going to get a whole lot out of it. What is this thing going to even eat just to keep itself alive? That's one thing you have to think about these super predators, is they have to consume so much energy to stay alive. They have to eat a ton of massive items, and it's just not realistic at all. And we would know this thing existed. Like, even if it was like on the bottom of the ocean, we'd have an idea, right? If it had to feed upon these larger whales, we would see evidence of its existence in some way. So yeah, it's not in some secret grotto in the deep part of the ocean. That makes no real sense. Nevertheless, pictures of this are cool. Cause like, look at that lady and that little floaty thing. About to get eaten. You get this little surfer dude about to get destroyed by the sharks. So that's kind of sweet. But let's look at something else though. Where else can you find some sharks? Right? They're found in the ocean, freshwater. But where else can you find some? On land? Turns out there's an article that I read recently that showed that some sharks are able to use their fins to walk. Now, not really on land as much, but in shallow water areas. And so there's about 9 species now of these things. There's some recently discovered in, of course, Australia. This sounds horrible, but it's not that bad. But these walking sharks use their fins to walk along the bottom of the water. And they're just a little predator, and they eat a bunch of small things. So they're not going to really hurt you in any way, but they can be in shallow water, and some very shallow water in these low tide type times. They're not that long, and they're not going to really hurt people. But they can withstand low oxygen environments, which is pretty impressive. And so they can actually feed on these sorts of items, and when there's maybe not a lot of other predators around. So able to seize an opportunity. There'll be a video of these things doing their thing in the playlist for the week. But where else? In the street. What? Sharks in my street? Boom! Street Sharks. This is a cartoon that came out in the 90s. I watched it a little bit. I like the toys better. I had one. Which one? I'll show you later. But yeah, these things were some teenagers that were mutated via biotechnology into sharks, as you can see here. And if you ever take my biotechnology seminar class, I actually showed this clip, like the second week of class, as we talk about it. And it's pretty insane what happens here. It's like these dudes just walking around as sharks. Like, how do they breathe? Like, they have lungs for the gills, but they have gills, or they look like they have gills, but like, I don't know. I have so many questions. And they speak, but like, they don't have the structures to speak. It makes no sense. And then, of course, they put a orca in there. It's not a shark, it's a mammal. It's very, very different. But they made one of those become a thing too. So they had the orca street shark. I actually forgot that thing existed until the other day. I saw an action figure for sale for it. I didn't buy it, but I saw one. My favorite of these was the hammerhead version because I'm a sucker for some hammerheads. The blue one's cool too. The blue one with the pink stripes to it. But also in space. What? So I was reading some Thor comics recently, and actually just a couple days ago, and there's a big battle scene with 3 different versions of Thor, from before he was worthy of Mjolnir, current Avengers Thor, and then Thor thousands of years in the future as Allfather King Thor. And so they're coming together to fight this dude called the God Butcher. And then along the way, star sharks became a thing. Just a bunch of gigantic sharks flying through space because, hey, why not? And they can be 100 feet long, very aggressive, and move very quickly. However, they can't reach light speed, so that's comforting. And you can actually see a picture here on the left side of young Thor, who's not quite worthy, yet riding a star shark into battle to try and take on that gore guy on the left side. Comics are pretty amazing. And as it turns out, I was reading about these things, and the hit movie The Avengers from 2012, and also in Endgame recently, we had these big little flying things shown, and they come like sharks. And it turns out in the comic history, they were actually created from genetically mutating the genetics of the star sharks and the creature. The Shatari helped make that happen. So we've seen them. They're like their work, kind of in a way, on the big screen already. So that's kind of cool. So sharks, you can find them all over the place. Also, sharks, generally internal fertilization. Here's a couple different sharks over here. We have the hammerhead, the goblin, and the tiger shark. So those are found. But mating, usually internal fertilization. There can be external. There's also some that give birth via eggs or live birth. So there's a couple different types found. Mating often involves some sort of biting ritual, and then claspers being used, and then those being used to send the sperm into the female via the opening there. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And so the males are the ones that have the claspers. You should have seen that in the dissection video. They're not an independent appendage, so it's not like a shark penis. It's a different thing. It's just a groove that allows sperm to travel down it, and it's an extension of the fins. And so Their teeth evolve from placoid scales. And so, yeah, and they have their teeth are constantly replaced, which is awesome, and they're very, very sharp. So, man, I wish kind of had some shark teeth because I don't have to worry about like going to the dentist anymore. It's like, yeah, I'll grow some new ones. So a lot of times when they'll feed, they'll just lose teeth, and then they have another row just ready to go, just constant cycling through. And of course, they have that lateral line system we talked about before to help them navigate the water column. Another thing about sharks, they have one cool thing that was learned about a couple of decades ago was this competition in the womb. So this was discovered in the late 80s or in the 80s. And they would actually perform autopsies on some sharks and figured that they could see some of these things happening. And so some sharks will actually cannibalize each other in utero, so inside the birth. So the sand tiger shark is an example of this. She'll have young inside of her brothers and sisters eating each other. And that's very unusual because it's like, why is this happening? Like, this is so bizarre. And the idea is that females are actually mating with multiple males. And so all those kids are not from the same father. So there's different genetics in there. So there's competition between fathers. And so which ones have their best offspring survive. And so that's what became the thing. And so there's recent research indicates that this is most likely the case, is that this is some sort of male versus male competition via their kids inside the womb of their mother. And so it's insane. And so there's a video that'll be part of this. You can actually see it happening live on camera, which is amazing. And there's an actual old legend about it, that there was a shark embryo that actually bit a researcher's hand during a dissection when he reached into his hand into the uterus of the shark's mother. Who knows what actually happened, but it's a legend that's there. And so one of the kind of ultimate things is the winner has their kid survive, while the loser father provides food for the rival male. So kind of insult to injury type of situation there. It's pretty great. So here's some examples of those big sharks mentioned. So these are three are some of the largest sharks around. So up high, we have the whale shark, basking shark in the bottom left. It looks like someone's going to eat you. Just don't swim in it because they might kill it. But it doesn't feast upon you. It's just a big filter feeder. And that weirdo thing in the bottom right that looks like, Thomas the Tank Engine mixed with a shark. It's called a megamouth shark. It's the third of the planktivorous sharks, which means they go around and feed on plankton. It's only 18 feet. It's pretty rare. It was first found in 1976 in very deep water, but not really found a whole lot since. And it has a very interesting rubbery lips looking structure to its mouth. But the whale sharks are one of my favorites. I love the whale shark. It's so cool. Some more diversity, I don't know about skates and rays too much. I thought I was trying to talk about those in a minute. Those are a thing, great whites. But hammerheads are one of my favorite sharks. There's been a lot of study figuring out why they have the shape that they do. Maybe to help expand the visual field or detect electrical fields. It's a couple of different hypotheses. A lot of sensory pores in the head region for sharks. The ampulla of Lorenzi are used to help detect on some electrical stuff. And so they're spread over wider areas, maybe help them catch prey easier is kind of an idea. I love me some hammerheads, though. I was definitely, one of my favorite anamorphs was one where they became hammerheads at some point. It was just, I don't know, it's so cool. The great hammerheads can reach 20 feet. They do not care about their kids after they're born, but they do give birth to live young. And so it's just, they're a cool thing. They reproduce once a year. And then my favorite of the street sharks was the hammerhead shark, and that's the one I had the toy of. So it actually had a cool fake skin type structure to it, which is pretty neat. Bad for a toy. But so here you can see the little holes on the bottom, and so that's the increased ampullae that they have. It helps them the thinking is the shape that they have helps spread apart, and so they can pick up a better idea on where the food's coming from. Helps them find what they want to eat. One of those things is stingrays. So it helps them find those so they can eat them. And stingrays have to hide the sand, so it helps them navigate through, pick up on the signals they need to actually get food. Skater ray. Let's look at the differences. Rays have long whip-like tails without a caudal fin. Skates have a different system. They have a caudal fin, 2 dorsal fins, and a thicker, fleshier tail. So that's how you can kind of tell them the difference. So there's both of those shown here in these pictures. And they can have some modifications, such as being able to use electricity. to be able to try and catch prey. Manta rays are the largest. They have those cool little extra appendages near their head region. Saw an albino gif of one of those recently. Electricity can be used for communication, defense, navigation, so a variety of purposes, but they have it. Here's the manta ray. And so it's kind of neat. It has a cephalic fin kind of near its top. They can get very big. They have to move continuously to try and keep themselves alive, moving water across. They sometimes do some pretty cool jumps. It's kind of unknown why, but it could be like a behavioral thing, remove parasites, related to birthing, who knows. But it's a thing. And they do have a relationship with Marmora that'll hang out with them. And then that Pokemon connection kind of makes sense because that's the picture on the top left. And so this actually does happen in real life too. And there's actually one of the first ever like sanctuaries found for these things in the wild where they actually have young baby manta rays kind of hang out in one of those little spots. So that's pretty cool. It's found near in the Gulf of Mexico. All right, Chimaeras. So this is the oddball group. They have a venomous spine for protection on the top of their body. They can use electroreception. They have different anal and urogenital openings, which is different from the shark, which says the cloaca. They don't have as many teeth and not replaceable, so they're kind of weird. They kind of don't have some of the more classic chondrichthyes type characteristics. But they branched off from the more classic sharks about 400 million years ago, so they're definitely, they've had some time to do their own things. They were once more diverse, but now they're a little less so in the current days. Also called like the ghost shark, spookfish, so they got some other colorful names. But now, let's talk about the actual, some more vertebrates, and then we're going to get to the more classic fishes you're aware of, ACTINOPTERYGII, and then we'll also look at SUBPHYLUM. So yeah, those are cool ones. Again, these are more classic type fish we're looking at. All right, ACTINOPTERYGII. These are the ray-finned fish. Say the name a few times. It'll make it a little easy. ACTINOPTERYGI. ACTINOPTERYGI. And so they have hard bone endoskeleton. The first time we see that, and in the living form anyway. They do have a swim bladder. That's one of their unique characteristics. And they also have glands that secrete mucus to make it easier to swim and use less energy. They breathe in by using drawing water into the mouth, and then they will push it out over the gills. And so the operculum serves as a gill cover and pump, so they can kind of stand still a little easier and breathe a little better. But compared to like the sharks, who a good chunk of them need to move. They have a swim bladder that gives rise to buoyancy. And so the swim bladder, interestingly enough, was always thought to be a precursor to the lung. But as it turns out, the lung could have been there first, and the swim bladder came about from that lung. So this is all still very much a research thing of figuring out what's going on. Yeah, it's just kind of neat. And they have mostly external reproduction. So they just lay eggs, sperm comes along, boom, babies. In terms of fish, they have some great overall importance in people. So we feed upon them. They have, pets, pet trade, aquarium. People like them. There's a fish that actually mated in space, the Japanese rice fish. It went up on the spaceship Columbia in the 90s and mated up there. That's one of the fish shown here. So that's kind of cool. They do just so. And so, yeah, we fed upon them, but some fish reproduce at different rates. So sometimes we've harvested fish for commercial purposes for food. They don't grow that quick. And those have crashed as a result. So got to make sure you use a fish that's reliable and can grow, has a more consistent growing season to it. And also grows quick and has a short generation time. And so other ones it takes forever and it's just not sustainable. But yeah, so within ACTINOPTERYGI, this is the major classic fish group. So most of the species of fishes are found here. So when we talk about 60,000 vertebrates, half of them are ACTINOPTERYGI, right? So that's a ton of species found in this group. They're found all sorts of bodies on the water. You can have caves, middle of nowhere, that have fish in them. All sorts of bodies of water they can be found and present in. Classic fish. Most are oviparous, which means they lay eggs. And they are the biggest group here is a group called Teleost, which has the most species of vertebrates around. So almost 27,000 species of the 60,000 total vertebrates. Most are ectothermic. They can have different types of reproduction. Lots and lots of variation here in diversity in this group. So tons of exceptions, tons of oddness. We got, the flounder with the eyes on the same side of the head. You got massive fish. You got colorful fish. You got some that can shoot water out of the mouths and catch prey. You got some that have these little barbels around the mouth that hurt and they can whip it around. You got some that are pets. Some that can change colors. Some that can change sexes. You can get all kinds of stuff. So fish are super, super cool. Tons of different phenotype forms they'll take. Eel forms, less eel forms, big flats, some cute, some ugly, just kind of everything. So it's a good time. I love me some fish. Some cool fish Pokemon. Magikarp, right? It's a favorite. Here's some basic fish anatomy. You don't have to know too much from this. Just recognize some similar structures. Like, they got intestines too. They got the swim bladder. That's the big one that they have. So, yay, fishies. I had 2 pet fish once. They died. I do not have them anymore. I didn't have them very long. My roommate's dog in college knocked their tank over and they dried out and died. They were beta fish. I had a male and a female. I was kind of thinking about trying to breed them at one point, but I was like, maybe that's too much. But I never had the choice because they were gone like 2 months after I bought them. So it's kind of sad. Anyway, they haven't had any fish since then. I'm kind of good. There's a lot of upkeep. Here's some big fish. I don't know who any of these people are, but they posed for a photo, and it's perfect because it gives you an idea of how big this oarfish was that they caught. It's one of the longest fish, if not the longest fish, around. And then we also have this big old sunfish, which is another big rascal. It's kind of an odd-looking fish, ugly. So, but hey, that dog though in this picture looks so confused. So, because I mean, the thing's like, what fresh hell have you brought upon and showed me now? Like, it's like, am I the only one disturbed by how long this fish is? Like, this isn't natural. The dog is the sane one here, but it's just kind of entertaining. I don't know who those people are. They look happy though. A class maybe? Who knows? Where's the teacher? There's no teacher. Anyway, teleost. They have a wide range of habits of mating habits. So fish behavior is something I almost studied in grad school. I almost went to a school in Kentucky where I've done a research project with fish. I ultimately did not. I worked with mammals, so I went to Georgia Southern instead. But once upon a time, this could have been me. Some very interesting things. One of them, I mentioned this earlier, can change sex. And so they can start life as a female, transition to a male at some point, or vice versa. And it can depend on the social structure that the community lives in, or it can be based on size. So for some fish, they'll start off female, then once they reach a certain size, they'll change to a male. The idea is, once you reach a certain size threshold, you'll have a higher number of offspring chances by changing to a male, which is releasing sperm everywhere, rather than dealing with the whole egg business, which are a little more costly to make. And there's other ones that it's just society based. So if like the lead fish dies, the other one will change sex over and swap, and then take over that group. So it's very fascinating and cool behavior. Their genetics are kind of different. So it's just kind of cool. It's very neat. We'll talk about a very famous example of where that should have happened in the movie. But there's others that engage in courtship rituals. So one of the more famous ones here is the three-spined stickleback, shown in the top right. There's a very famous animal behaviorist. His name was Nico Tenbergen. If you ever take animal behavior, I'm sure you'll learn about him. He was a very big deal. One of the things he studied was three-spined sticklebacks. And so the males will go through this very elaborate nest-building ritual. And then they'll go through and kind of go crazy trying to build up this nest. And then they're trying to lure in the females with it. And then they do like a little zigzag dance to try and draw their attention. And then eventually the female will go in, lay the eggs, and then the male goes in and like nudges her to make sure she actually releases the eggs. And then he kicks her out, and then he guards the eggs after he fertilizes them to make sure that the kids pop up again. And then if he sees another male, he'll glow red, and they respond to anything that's red. So Tenbergen would keep these in a tank in his office, and then a red bus or red truck would drive by every day. And then every time these fish saw that red truck, they get so pissed off and try and attack the truck because it was red, and they cannot stand the color red. And so there's some good videos. Just watch them. They're there in the playlist that shows this. It's super fantastic. It's a whole little experiment with it. And they stick in a little fake fish that looks red, and the thing goes right after it immediately. It's amazing. I mentioned earlier, though, fish are important. People like fish. People like to eat fish. I'm personally not a big fan. I only like fish sticks, and that's about it. Otherwise, I'm good. Never been a big tuna fish guy. but it's there. But tourism, it's popular. People go and spend money to see reefs, see all these beautiful fish. Unfortunately, the pet trade can be a thing that can decimate wild populations. But in general, there are some that are grown a little more sustainably, so you can have some pet fish. People like them. I spent a lot of money on these aquariums. It was inspired a movie called Deuce Bigelow because there was a lionfish in there that Deuce Bigelow destroys. And so he has to try and replace it, and so he does so. The irony there is lionfish are highly invasive, so he could have just easily gotten another one from the ocean. But maybe he didn't live near that area or something. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie in a long time. It's not that great. But yeah, fish are pretty cool. One famous example of fish, of course, Old Nemo, and the sequel, Dory. One thing though is there's a lot of things wrong with this movie. And the more you know about fish and behavior, the more you kind of spot some of the errors in some of these movies. You let it go, right? But I mean, it's like, this isn't how it goes. So clownfish are very much one that will change sex. And so they will do so. And so the two large fish are the only ones that actually will sexually mature in the group, and we're actually the ones that only reproduce. So within these clownfish, you have like a larger population of them, like around like anemone, some small ones, some big ones. The big ones reproduce. The other ones just kind of hang out, wait for their time. All the smaller fish are male. The largest one is female. If you lose the large breeding female, the male mate that she has will then change to a female. And then the next largest fish will become the male. And so that's what should have happened here. So old Marlin here should have become Marlena and then raised Nemo by herself. Or just had a new man pop up on the show, a new Nemo or a new Marlin. So yeah, that should have been how it went. Also, they don't care about their offspring that much. Most fish don't. So to see that much strong parental care and desire to protect their offspring is very rare. So they were just laid the eggs and kind of forgot about it and moved on. It's a ton of fish eggs. So yeah, also Nemo would have died. That type of fin defect, we're gonna make him prone to capture and prey. So you mean maybe not, but yeah, Marlin should have been Marlena. That's the Disney movie. I would like to see that movie of Pixar, but oh well. I guess they wanted the voice of that guy. But yeah, that's how clownfish usually are. It's a fun one to share with kids. It blows some minds, that's for sure. Share that with the next aquarium next time you're there. Be like, oh yeah, Nemo? Well, turns out. But yeah, it's just kind of cool. They're far from the only fish that can do that sort of thing. Zebrafish, speaking of cool fish, this joker is studied genetically for a variety of reasons. It's a cool little fish. I like them because they're called zebras, and zebras are fun. They have been used to help make drugs to deal with skin cancer treatments. There's a lot of analogs to genes in them that also cause disease in us, so they're good research organisms to deal with genetic diseases, including muscular dystrophy. They were very common in aquaria, and then we eventually realized how good they can be as research organisms, and they've been used since the 60s. You can also see some of their cells over there to study development, so including heart development. You can also use these to see what compounds have an effect on the heart and its functioning, so they're very important research organisms. Here's some more diversity in the forums. I mean, I could spend all day talking about these fish. I mean, I literally took an entire class about fish called ichthyology. There is a biology of the fishes class offered here, so if you want to learn more, definitely take it. They're amazing creatures. But you got some cool puffers. You got sea dragons. I saw a pretty awesome exhibit in Chattanooga several years ago now that had a big sea dragon type stuff going on, tons of seahorses, parrotfish, and with these different fish, not only do they look cool, but you can get some things out of them. You can learn about different properties or proteins or chemicals they can make and how we can use them in some way. And it's just awesome. But I was definitely able to see one of these leafy sea dragons before, and that was really cool. It's a fun experience. The pictures didn't turn out that great, so I don't have any. That's weird because of the glare in the dark room against the glass. It doesn't turn out right. The anglerfish, we mentioned this in the most solitary animals, that social distancing thing. Deep sea fish, that's what they are. They have this little lure they can lose to draw in prey. Going back to Nemo, the reason why it's BS is when you have those two little reef fish going down to the deep part of the ocean, they ain't gonna fly, folks. And when they go down that far, pressure will crush their corpses into nothingness and they will die. So the movie should have ended right then and there with them dead. But alas, they did not, because, I'm sorry, pressure's a thing, and adaptations are a thing. And that same anglerfish cannot go far up in the water column as easily, because then it would expand and explode in a different way. So one's going to implode, other's going to explode, because that's how pressure works. So that's the one that actually bothers me the most. It's like, come on, man, like, you can't just throw these things out there. I mean, maybe fine, I'll allow it. Maybe it wasn't super deep sea, but the implication was they went down to so far down the lightless zone that it was definitely a deep sea situation. So there's some shenanigans there, all kinds of it. But one thing that's cool about them, I mentioned this, is the greatly reduced males. See in the bottom left picture, there's a little appendage coming off the top of that. Well, that's the female. The big one is the female, and that tiny little appendage is the male. They serve as little more than sperm sacs for the female, almost parasitic in a way. They latch on, get all their sustenance from the female, and then when she decides to have children, she gets the sperm from the male, lays the eggs, bada bing, bada boom, baby anglerfish. It's pretty cool. So they're not always the prettiest of fish, but hey, they do the thing. But they have bioluminescence they can use to help lure in the prey items, and that was actually kind of cool about the Nemo thing, is they actually used that. Like, hey, look, pretty little shiny thing, and they almost got eaten because of it, which is kind of cool. And the image of the anglerfish wasn't that bad from the real deal. But here's some other anglerfish. There's a lot of species and diversity in them. Common theme, pretty ugly, but it's in the deep part of the ocean. They're trying to survive. And plus, when you yank them up from the bottom, it's kind of hard for some fish stands to get a little. Seahorses are cool. Hopefully there's a cool video I have of one giving birth. Males famously carry the young in there, but some can be very small, and small as a couple of inches. So you can see one in the middle, kind of. It's super itty bitty, tiny little thing. And there's other ones that are just kind of more neat. There's a ruby sea dragon. So in the kind of in the bottom left area, the one's kind of reddish. It was discovered recently in Australia and does not have and sort of like any strong leafy appendages to it, but like the leafy sea dragon does. But they're such a cool little organism. That's one that seems fake. Some more fish. So you can also have cave fish that kind of lose all coloration and eyes. It's very, very common to see in various dark environments for organisms. That's just an odd, striking example of a fish. Then I went to Bok Tower, and so one of the cool things at the Bok Tower is there's koi there, and so it's kind of cool because they actually, if you go near the edge, they kind of see people there, and they'll go over there and swarm because they're so used to being fed, so they've responded to it in that way. So just go and like open up their mouths near the water, and like make a little like almost a begging type motion for some food. And then on the bottom right is a fish called the Devil's Hole pupfish. Now this thing is one of the world's rarest fishes. It's endangered and only found in one water cavern in Death Valley, California, / Nevada, somewhere around that area. And so, yeah, it's extremely rare, but it looks so cute, you know? It's a cute little fish. The blind cat shown there is called the Mexican blind cat. It was recently captured in Texas and only lives in caves and does not get very big. Not a lot of food in those. And then one more fun symbiosis. We're nearing the end here, I promise. This is a long one. This is one of the longest ones we're going to have going forward. Well, that's not entirely true. Amphibians and reptiles is pretty long too. But this is a long one. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. But another cool one is the cleaner wrasse symbiosis relationship. And so a fish goes inside the mouth of another fish. Bold, considering this is a predatory fish-eat-fish world that we live in. But nevertheless, it makes it out. So it gets the teeth cleaning, essentially, feeds up on a bunch of excess crap that's inside the big fish's mouth, and the little fish gets a meal out of it. And everybody wins, right? Nobody wants a bunch of yucky teeth. Downside is life is full of cheaters and things trying to exploit things. And so there's fake cleaner wrasses, like cleaner wrasses that will go in, and instead of cleaning teeth, take a bite out of the flesh of the fish. So the whole structure is threatened to fall apart. So you never know what's going to happen. But there's always somebody, got to take advantage of it, be the jerk. So it's interesting. Pufferfish, so they get puffy. They can have the chodotoxin, be very deadly, can kill you. That's one of these things can be done. In the recent John Wick 3 movie, this was mentioned. Also, an episode of The Simpsons, and was one of the most depressing episodes of The Simpsons I've ever seen. I will never watch it again. But Homer thinks he's eaten one. He only has a day left to live. And man, it's dark. It goes places. But yeah, the chodotoxin. Maybe just don't eat it, so you won't die. But do what you do, Here's some more fish. The pacu, top left, looks like it has human teeth in it. It doesn't. It just looks weird. Armored catfish are pretty awesome. They're in the middle bottom. They're pretty cool, found in South America. I had a teacher in college who taught my evolution class. He did a lot of research on those things. He actually named a species, which is pretty cool. Flying fish, they can kind of glide in the air. That's kind of cool. Bottom right, you have that thing. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I always forget what the stupid thing's called. Paddlefish? Paddlefish. That's it. And so that makes sense. So there's one in America and one in China, both critically endangered and rough shape. A lot of poaching has been a problem due to caviar. They can live a while, which is kind of cool, but it's found inside the Mississippi River Basin. So, but yeah, they're not doing well population-wise. Top right is a batfish. Look at that thing. It's walking around with its little legs. It's kind of funny. So it's an odd-looking fish. And then the kangaroo in the middle part is famous in folk legend for swimming up your urethra when you're taking a pee and getting lodged inside a man's penis. Now, that's a interesting tale, and it came from like one case where this allegedly happened, but it turns out this is pretty much mostly urban myth, and there's not really any evidence of it actually, concrete, solid evidence is actually happening. However, next time if you're in the South America region, you want to pee in a lake and give it a shot, go ahead. Who knows? You might get a kangaroo stuck up there. The danger is, I would not recommend doing that, even if it's there, or if it's not going to happen. But still, you don't want to run the risk. Is it could get wedged with its little spines it has, and it can be very difficult to remove. So that's why this horrible folk legend really grew. So pee and safety is my lesson there. Avoid getting catfish up you. Anyway, here's a big catfish here, the Mekong. And so this is one of the biggest fish in the entire world, found in the Mekong River, found in Asia. So, want to see one? That's where you want to go. Lionfish, it's a jerk. It's invasive in Florida. Big problem for feeding on all of our native fish. It's extremely voracious predator. It just goes around, opens up its mouth, and just sucks up fish into it there. It's just insane. Huge jerk. There's some killing derbies going on nowadays, so you can actually go through and participate in teams so you can kill the most. Some people are trying to eat them, actually. I know there's some restaurants down there trying to find ways to feed upon them. They are dangerous to touch. Once you get away from all of that, the meat is fine. But they are an extreme danger. We're trying to control their population, but they just keep exploding. But yeah, there's some pretty cool... there should be a video in the companion videos that kind of talks about them a little more and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they're not good. They look pretty, but they're not good. All right, talk about a lot of fish diversity. Let's mix it up a little bit and talk about fish circulatory system. Why not? So when you look at this and you compare it to how our circulatory system works, you should see some obvious differences. But one of the big ones is it's kind of missing some chambers of the heart, number one. We have 4. This thing has 2. And then also our heart and our circulatory system, in case you don't know this, goes heart to lungs, and then it goes back to the heart, and then goes throughout the body. It's a 2-circuit system. This thing is a 1-circuit system. So therefore, big difference. And so what happens is the heart cannot pump at too high of a pressure because blood leaves the heart and goes to the gills. This is a closed circulatory system, right? And so it goes towards the gills, but at low pressure. If it's too high of a pressure, it'll cause those capillaries to burst because there's thin walls. And then you got a bloody fish everywhere that can't live anymore, so it's going to die. So you need to have a thin pressure that goes through, hits the gills, absorbs oxygen, and then it guides back through the body. And usually muscle movement is involved a lot here. So their muscles help drive and be one of the main drivers of pushing blood flow through. But their blood pressure is overall pretty low. Because it can't get too high, else it'll burst the capillaries. And so we have a different way of doing that. We have 2 pumps. One pump's light that goes to the lungs, other part's serious that goes throughout the body to counteract that. Are we better? I don't know. I kind of think so in this way. But the heart has to generate enough force to go throughout the body and also to the gills, so it needs to be high, but not too high. Oxygenated blood does not go back to the heart. That's a huge difference. It is a single circuit system, which means single circuit. It just goes from the heart to the lungs, to the gills, to the body, back to the heart. And then there's capillaries that are involved. These are extremely thin vessels. Does not take a lot to burst those jokers. That's why the low pressure is key. but they're so thin, which allows for gas exchange to take place. We have copious amounts of capillaries in our own lungs, allowing for gas exchange to occur, and capillary beds all throughout the body, allowing for gas exchange and nutrient exchange in the body. If you're curious about learning more about how that works, take A&P2. We talk about it extensively. But when you have the overall some more blood flow for the heart and the fish circulatory system, deoxygenated blood enters the atrium. This is pretty much the case all the time. However, there's an exception once you get to the double circuits. It goes into the ventricle, which is the pump of the heart, and then that pumps the blood to the gills where it becomes oxygenated, and that travels throughout the body. You should have a good working idea on how all the circulatory systems that we're going to talk about, how they all work. We're going to look at ones for all the major groups. So we're going to look at one for fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. You should be able to compare and contrast them and tell me what's what. This is our first entry into that. So start now. All right. Nearing the end of this journey, if anybody's still listening, I'll be quietly shocked. But I've probably broken it down a little bit. I'm Clint Eastwood, or I follow the Clint Eastwood philosophy. I just roll through this thing, get it all done in one take. So, yeah, we're doing it. Still Saturday where I'm at, doing this. So, another major group of fish are the Sarcopterygians, which are the lobed fin fish. These are different. Their fin structure is different. So, while the other ones are ray fin fish, if you look at their skeletal structure, you can see these little rays coming off. These have lobes to them. This turns out to be pretty significant because these things are kind of like us. What? So, yes, there's 3 genera of lungfish. We'll get to them first, and we'll talk about it. Then we'll explore the human land connection that we're going to look at in a second. 3 genera found in Africa, South America, and Australia. They are freshwater. They look cool. I'm a fan of the lungfish, of course. Big fan of those. And so, yeah, they're cool. They use their fins to walk along the bottom, but those fins are kind of crappy looking, so they can't walk that well. But they are there. On top is the African lungfish. I've seen one of those in person. It was adorable. I was in a tank in grad school at Georgia Southern. They had one. I love going and see that thing. It would pop up and get some water or some air every time it'd see me. Well, not really. It would just breathe. But yeah, it was kind of cool. They're called lungfish because they do have lungs. That means they have to go up and breathe air. So they do not have gills. So do not say these things have gills because it's a lie. They have lungs. They breathe air. So they have to do that. And so you can actually see that happen if you observe. I always liked that thing. It was cool. But and then there's another one called the coelacanth. It's a little lobe lung-filled fish. This is kind of different. But so these are living fossils. They were recently discovered again in 1938. It was thought to be extinct until some guy found it in a fish market. It's like, oh, wait a minute. This thing shouldn't be alive. But somebody was selling it. So, boom, discovered. Then in 98, we found another species. We got 2 species of these things. All happened in the past 100 years. That could be you. Go out and explore. Check out your local fish market and see what you might find. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Lungfish are cool, so they live in areas where water might fade, so they can burrow in the mud when that happens, and then just kind of breathe air and be surrounded by mud, so they stay moist. So, hey, whatever floats you. All right, here's some more of those pictures of them. We've got the African, the South American, and the Australian. They're not the most glamorous of fish, but I still like them all the same. I think they're cool. I don't know. Like, it's like, you know what? If I had to pick a good buddy fish, it'd probably be one of these things. But yeah, it's an odd distribution, but it is what it is. All right, with these lobed, there's only 8 species total of the aquatic lobe fin fishes. And so there's the lungfish, 6 of those, the 2 coelacanths. However, the total number of species in Sarcopterygium is over 30,000 species, because this includes all tetrapods, amphibians, birds, reptiles, crocodiles, us. We're all derived from these lobe fin fishes. So that's us. We're included in this. So these are kind of our kindred spirits. So it's kind of cool. Definitely been a fan. And this bottom left does coelacanth. So it's a living fossil. One discovered recently. Has teeth covered by true enamel. Has a lung it does not use for breathing, but it still has a lung. It uses its function more like a swim bladder in this case. And it has a type of scale that only extinct fish have these days. But yeah, it's truly insane. Only 8 actual lobe-finned fishes, but the entire group has a massive amount. So it's just kind of cool. Because we're all included. Yay! We're all fishes. Here's an example of the coelacanth to the human. You get an idea for that bone structure. And so that ancestry, right? They kind of get a little lobe going there. Kind of see the inklings of an arm in there. Compared to that piece of crap over there on the ray fin fish, it's like, look at that garbage. How do they even call that a fin? You know, a couple little bone fragments with some sticks coming off of it. Like, man, come on. Lame. But, yeah, that's not our... Well, we all share an ancestor, but our more direct common ancestor would be the lobed fin fish. Look at that coelacanth arm. Yeah, that's our thing. Not that junk ray fin thing over there. EOS. All right, almost at the end of our journey. Another example of the Sarcopterygians, Dipnoi has the lungfishes. So they have a simple lung for gas exchange. They use that to breathe. They live in ponds that are very, they don't last, they don't have a lot of water movement through them, so pretty stagnant, and they can go away. So they breathe air above the water. So that's what they'll do. So if you see these in an aquarium, they'll swim up and breathe air. So if you get one of these in an aquarium, don't shove it full of water. Let it have access to open air, so otherwise it's going to die. But it can spend the dry spells in a state of dormancy, so I'm kind of going like a hibernation type state, where it can still breathe and still survive, just in some mud. So be careful digging up mud. You could see a lungfish, but probably not here because they're not around here. But then again, it's Florida. A lot of animals are brought over here, like pythons. They don't necessarily need to be here. So yeah. The ancestor of lobe and ray fin fishes actually had lungs and gills, but the lineage just shifted. Ray used the gills, and then the lung became the swim bladder. Meanwhile, here, the lobe stayed. The lung stayed, and the gills and some have gills. But yeah, okay. Anyway, that's about it of those. So they can live a long time in captivity, and so that's what's kind of cool. So if you want one as a pet, it could outlive you. So maybe don't get one as a pet. I don't know. Do what you want. I don't know if you can even get them as pets. But they're there. One of the more famous of these, this is what I want to end on as a happy note, is there was a famous lungfish called Grandad. It was in the Chicago Aquarium. He lived there. It was estimated to be 100 years old when he finally died. He died in 2017, so about 3 years ago now. And he just kind of hung out in the aquarium, but people loved him. It was an Australian lungfish. Kids loved him. All the people loved him, would go through and just check him out and just really like to hang out near him. A fan favorite for sure. Every now and then he'd get up and get a gulp of air, and people would just go crazy for it. It was just insane. The cult following this fish had, it would just do its thing. And so, yeah, they liked it. He would also make some snorts, and the people liked him. So, yeah, he was a big fan favorite fish. Anyway, there was also people who got married in front of it. So that's a choice. But they got married in front of this Grandad lungfish, who had probably no concern for any of these other people around, but people loved him. So BA's dead now, but still, that was pretty cool. So long time lungfish. It's nice to see lungfish appreciated in captivity when most people don't seem to care about them. But yeah, anyway, that's it for the fishes. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a long one. Thanks for sticking with it. Hope you actually listened to all of it. But if not, I get it. But stick around for the next batch. Talk about some amphibians next time. Next week. See ya.